Hey, welcome into Dynasty Savvy. I'm Blake, and today I'm going to be referring to a video made by Pure Potential Fantasy and just an really interesting topic. This topic revolves around a chart where there's four different quadrants, basically going over fantasy points scored versus market value. And basically, I'm making a series of identifying what quadrant each of your teams are in and how to get it ultimately into this quadrant up here, the top right. This just means that you're above average in points scored and above average in dynasty value. It's important to be in this quadrant for obvious reasons. I mean, you want to have one of the more valuable teams in your league, as well as you want to be a playoff team. You want to be scoring and getting in the playoffs every single year. So, it's pretty self-explanatory. So today we're going to be reviewing, the worst spot to be in, low production and low dynasty value. So basically the bottom left quadrant is what we're going to be talking about and how to recover a team like this. We've all had a team in this area. I mean, the one team that I actually really had it in this area where it's just not scoring points, it's below average and market value, was actually an orphan. And nonetheless, that team looks awesome now. So basically, I'm going to be going over some principles I used in rebuilding that team and just stuff I do just in general when trying to rebuild a team or reload a team. So yeah, let's jump into it. So before we get into any tactics, how do you identify if you're in this quadrant and your team's in a state where you need to basically reload it so you can keep trying to go in the playoffs in the future and avoid a huge rebuild? There's a chance you need to completely scrap things if you are actually in this quadrant. If maybe you orphaned a team or just things went really bad. If that's the case, you'll know. I don't need to explain that team to you, but maybe for those of you, have a team where you're like, I could make the playoffs, but I don't have any future picks, or maybe like I don't have my 25 first. These are going to generally be the teams where you're missing some draft picks in the future, especially the first. You're missing star players. Like, that is the important thing. If you are missing true difference makers like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, even a Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, CMC. If you don't have players like that in your roster, I mean, it's panic mode. Especially, or if you don't have any quarterbacks either. If your quarterbacks are Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, you can win a championship with them, sure, but you need those star players to carry them. Now, obviously, you can have an idea of your player's projected points total. In fact, on Sleeper right now, it'll give you a projection. It's very basic projection, but nonetheless, it's still something to show you. If you were down 20 points from the league, median scoring or league average projected scoring, you might be in trouble. If you're just sitting in the middle, I wouldn't overreact. This is why, websites like Keep Trade Cut and Dynasty Daddy, I'm sure there's plenty other out there. They have league power rankings, and they're important for value. It'll actually just break down your roster, tell you how valuable your roster is compared to other teams in your league. And you want to be using these resources to identify, like, if you're in the bottom three and you're not, and like a favorite to win, it's not looking good. It's not looking good. So yeah, I mean, that's how you're gonna identify if you're in the bottom left quadrant. Anyways, let's get in. How do we fix this? So first off, let's identify our goal. Our goal is to get to the top right quadrant. Now, in order to do that, you can't just skip from that bottom left to top right. You need to curve your way around into being a low productive and high value team. How do you do that? Obviously, you are going to rebuild. You're going to unload your vets. I mean, this is obvious stuff, but I think it's important, if your team has a chance of competing in the year, that you bring that roster into the season. Maybe you get hot. If you're not, that's when you can begin your rebuild. I wouldn't just suggest, if you have a chance at playoffs, just completely like panic selling everyone right now, because you're like, oh no, I might not make playoffs. Players are more, like, veterans are more valuable in season, of course. And rookies are actually like cheaper or whatever. Non-productive players are cheaper in season. So don't panic. It's fine to bring your old team into the season and make moves on the fly when people need those points off your roster. So yeah, let's say you didn't get off to a really hot start. You have some productive players on your team, but it's just not enough, and you're ready to just rebuild. Your goal is not to. I don't ever want to be rebuilding for like 2 years. I hear people saying, oh, I'm going to this 2 year rebuild. Like, I had a roster with just Jahan Dotson, literally just Jahan Dotson, and I mean, like the roster is just like it's like stacked now. I mean, it's just insane. Um, and I did that 1 year, right? Like, obviously, a ton of trades needed to be made, but like it's possible. You just if you make the right moves, um, you can have an extremely productive and young team or high value team in just one season. So that's going to be your goal. Don't set your sights at an extremely long rebuild. It's going to be more of a 1 year reload, I like to call it. If you're in this situation, you have to realize that without, you're never going to be the most valuable team right away um, without a lot of luck. Obviously, if you're on draft picks, and stuff like that, that helps. But you want to be liquidating your players into picks. Let's actually jump into moves to make now. Like I said, move veterans off. Don't try to get the maximum value. Don't be panicking. And know when to sell a guy like in the right window. Don't sell a veteran that is injured for 2 weeks and gonna come back. Like, if wait for him to be healthy so someone will actually want him, let him play a game, whatever, and get points. Try to maximize the value of the players that you're selling. The first step actually is to recoup draft picks. If you've lost them, you need to make sure you have your first and second round pick next year. If you don't have your third or fourth big whoop, hopefully you have them all. So I've seen this in leagues. It makes no sense. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking, but I've seen people start a rebuild without their first and then trade for their first after they've started to rebuild. Like, it makes no sense. You're selling your pick at its lowest in the previous, and you're buying it at its highest point. It's just ridiculous. Like, that is never a move you should be making. So make sure if you are gonna start your rebuild, harass that manager, get your first back, even if you have to like slightly overpay. Don't give them information that you're going to be rebuilding. Just say you want your draft pick back, whatever. Don't even say anything. Get it back. Your second is important as well, because literally, if you were trying to get the 101, which is your goal when reloading, your second round pick is literally a late first. So make sure you get those. So after you make sure you have your picks, obviously we're swapping your veterans into draft picks. Like, that stuff is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not gonna tell you to go sell Ramondre Stevenson for a second. Like, you know what, like, whatever these players are worth, you want to get every running back basically off your roster. I don't care if it's Devon Achane, get them off your roster. You literally don't want to have a single running back on your roster when reloading, for two reasons. Number one, we know they're extremely fragile in value. They can just turn into dust at any moment. And number two, you want to minimize your max points for, which is probably most of your guys' league settings. But whatever, if it's your total points for record, if you have like Kenneth Gainwell as your RB1, which is like my bet, which is what I always do when I'm tanking. I mean, that's how you get the 1-1. It's just having literally no running backs. So yeah, get these running backs off your roster. Pretty self-explanatory, and try to lower your maximum points for. So if you got to sell guys lower, this is pet peeve of mine. Sell, like, just get obviously the maximum price you can. But if you're gonna be fighting over a fourth round pick, wherever, or like some throw-in, just realize that it's not worth. Like, you're actually losing value. If you're in a tight race for the first, second, third pick, whatever it is, and you're just holding a guy that's like actually going out there and smashing, and you could just be capitalizing on, and getting him the heck off your roster, you should be doing that. If that player scores, if you keep him extra 3 weeks and he scores 60 points for you, I mean, that's 60 points against your season total. Like, you get what I'm saying here. You're making your pick worse for your next year when you should be getting this guy the heck off your roster sooner than later. So yeah, big pet peeve of mine. Just I don't care. Get him off. This goes for like if you had Adam Thielen last year. I mean, people thought a second wasn't enough. Like just take your second. Just take literally anything you can get beyond that. Whatever. Get him off your roster. I mean, you don't want the corpse of Adam Thielen trying to ruin your 101. The next step, I never hear this talked about enough. It's something because there were so many injuries last year that I just took a huge advantage of. It's buy players when injured, but more specifically, buy stars when they're injured. I mean, we know that superstar players, Jefferson, Burrow, Anthony Richardson, like these are the guys that actually win you weeks. You want to buy them when they're at their lowest. They're not at their lowest when they score like 3 points 2 weeks in a row. They're at their lowest when they're just not on the field. And it might not even actually lower their price, but what it might do is the owner that has Jefferson when he's out for 10 weeks and who knows how long, or Burrow out for the season, they are now in a spot where they just lost them for like their best player for an entire season. And if they can make a swap to get that production back in some way, shape, or form, and somewhat get the value they want, oftentimes smart managers will do that, and they're not to blame. So realize you have leverage on these people first of all, and you should not be like overpaying. Let's say, for example, you have Puka. He's smashing again, top 10 receiver, and let's just say Jefferson gets hurt again. Okay, like let's literally just say it's last year. You should not be sending 2 firsts on top of Puka to get Jefferson, like 2 just like random mid first, whatever, because that player can now replace Jefferson's points and get 2 firsts. Yes, he loses Justin Jefferson, but he doesn't have any leverage in the situation. My whole point is hold your ground in your negotiations. Realize that you have control when trading for these injured players. It's not like there's just one superstar hurt. I mean, Jesus, so many every year. Let's say Garrett Wilson goes down. I mean, maybe he was. Let's just put ourselves in a scenario next year, right? If Garrett Wilson was a 15 point per game player, he was looking useful to your lineup more so than he ever has been, but wasn't like the wide receiver one. And he's out. Let's just say he's out for the season. I mean, if you're rebuilding, you're reloading, this is your time to go buy Garrett Wilson, right? So what you want to do is you want to go, if you have players on your roster, you want to go say, hey, here's Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman was outscoring Garrett Wilson, maybe. The names don't matter. You get the point. Here's Michael Pittman. Here's DK Metcalf. Depending on how their values match up, maybe you can just throw a second in there and get Garrett Wilson like when he's hurt, and unless he was just like the worst receiver out there ever, he's probably going to maintain his value for next year and be again a top 24 startup pick in Superflex drafts. So you get my point, and he'll be whatever 24 years old. So that's how you capitalize and get superstars on your roster in season, because it's not so much about the discount, which is a benefit, but it's about the manager actually having the manager willing to deal these players to you, because you have something that helps them out. So yeah, always never stay dormant. You want to be maximizing, your trade potential, and that's kind of a better move almost than trying to get draft picks in season. Of course, managers will want to get off draft picks to buy points, but if you can actually just turn it into a really good player, I mean that's almost better. Just obviously depends on what the specific trade is, but there's so many possibilities. Another strategy of mine is, be reactive with your bench instead of holding Justice Hill. Especially if Derrick Henry goes down, Justice Hill is like 5 points per game. No one will take him off your roster, whatever. just cut them, or just try to get fab for them, honestly. And the best thing you can do is just try to go load up on every backup quarterback possible, right? If you hit it on a backup quarterback like Browning, Flacco, whatever it is, Dobbs last year, you get a second for them. I mean, you could just either hold them hostage, which you're obviously going to be trying to trade them. There's no point of their points. But, I mean, if you can get a free fourth, that's free. You're thinking, whatever. If you're thinking what's a fourth going to do to me? That's, a 0% hit rate. It's not about the fourth itself. It's about that's a fact that in an ammo, maybe in the next draft, you can use that fourth to move up. Whatever, right? Just anything is better than nothing. I mean, if you can capitalize any kind of picks or fab out of backup quarterbacks that find even just like starting one game or a couple games, maybe you luck into the season. That's how you're gonna get free draft picks, free capital. And as I was mentioning earlier, with dumping those running backs off, do what you can to get the 101. Your goal is the 101. If you do not get the 101, depending on the class, I actually was fine with getting the 102. Like this year, just because like Caleb and Marv, it was just like 101, 1A, and 1B. That's not gonna happen every year, but make your draft pick as good as possible. You don't want to just be caught with James Conner just scoring points. You can't trade them. Just get them off your roster when it's a player like that. Like I mentioned, get the best draft pick possible. Let's flash forward. You got the 101. You got all your other picks that you accumulated through this year. Hopefully you got some for next year, whatever it is. The worst thing you can do is just draft the players. Like, Quinshon or whatever. Like, I'm going to draft Archer Manning with my 101 in 2026. Like, that's not what you're doing, right? Your goal now is to start taking that 101 and trade it. Keep trading, tearing down for picks, players, whatever it is. Take all your players. Like, honestly, probably in this strategy, what you want to do is you want to start adding players to your roster that are as young as possible and productive as possible. Like you're going to be left with a few guys that you already had that are pretty young and potentially still productive. Let's just give you a scenario. You have, you did this reload. You now have Anthony Richardson. You have Anthony Richardson. You have Michael Penix on your team who finds himself in a starting situation. You're set at quarterback. You had, you had Kyle Pitts on your team, so you held on to him, and a couple, pair of pretty valuable receivers that are young. Well, all you need, depending on your league settings, all you need to fill out now is a few roster like receiver spots and a couple running back spots. Like really, right? It's easy to buy the Gus Edwards each year. They're cheap. They can be productive. So like guys like that, you can pick up in tier downs as literal throw-ins. Your goal is now to fill out those roster spots, push capital into the next year, and if you can then build this semblance of a competitive roster and have a bunch of capital going into the next season, you're now sitting in the spot where you just went from, you're like a terrible team to much more valuable. And when you start doing the tier downs, you almost might even lose some value in some of your trades. Hopefully not, but you start to shift into the more productive and above average. You get what I'm saying here. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Please give me some feedback if there's anything that I didn't mention. I'd love to hear it. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe. Follow for more. The next video we're going to be doing how to take a high production team but low value team and turning that into the top right quadrant of a high value and high productive team.